Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, today I think we're going to start a new series, and I think it's right on time with everything going on right now, especially the recent events that took place in Mali with the capture of the French spy and the intrigues of the French government, as well as the fact that I've been going around debunking this person left and right, debunking all these grifters, even debunking the French government. I think it's right on time to let's dig up another interesting work, some literature left behind by the ancestors. Yes, indeed. This book came out in the year 1817 and it was entitled Political Remarks on Some French Works and French Newspapers Concerning Haiti, written by the great ancestor himself. As you can see, Baron de Vastey, Baron de Vastey, Vastey the Baron. Now, Vastey is also the author of the legendary book that I read. If you go to my playlist section entitled The Colonial System Unveiled, that book came out back in 1814 and one of the most legendary books of all time, actually giving the other side of the story, right? And when I say the other side of the story, I'm talking about our ancestors' side of the story, right? A lot of people call it the first piece of anti-colonial literature in world history, right? So where the Europeans were justifying their crimes against humanity and even saying that what they were doing is equal to bringing civilization, our ancestors struck back and gave the real story of what really happened, right? And exposed the names of the French colonists that committed the crimes as well. Legendary book. Go to my playlist section, check it out. Now we're going to be exploring another book from the great ancestor where he's going to be debunking the French newspapers, debunking the French journalists. Oh my God, I believe this book actually came out in the year 1817. But before we get into that, let's refresh your memory on who the author is, right? Take a look up on the screen. Vastey was a Haitian writer, educator, and politician. Vastey was what people at the time called a mulatto because he was born to a white French father and a black Haitian mother. He served as the secretary to King Henry Christophe and a tutor to Christophe's son. Vastey also claimed that he fought in Toussaint's army and is said to have been the second cousin of the French novelist and playwright Alexandre Dumas. Now, when it comes to Vastey, he comes on the international scene during the reign of Christophe. As you already know, in the year 1806, Toussaint was assassinated and the nation was divided into two governments. Now, even though Vastey himself was a mulatto, he was a man of mixed race. Instead of going to the south and joining up with the mulatto generals who dominated that territory, he instead went up into the north with Christophe, which was dominated by the black generals. Now, if you ask me, the reason why I believe he did that was because he simply had more closer ties to the guys in the north. Number one, Vastey wasn't even from the south. He was born and raised in the north on a plantation. During the revolution, he was a child soldier in the army of Toussaint Louverture. So he didn't have the same upbringing as the other men of mixed race from the south who was raised with a white father and was going to France and the military academies and the universities, right? Vastey was on a plantation, right? Vastey was in the trenches. Vastey was up north with the blacks. Vastey was born and raised around the blacks. So that's why, when it came time to choose, when the government was divided and Christophe took control of the north and Petron took control of the south, Vastey went up north, so shout out to the ancestor, much love and respect. Like I always say, under the reign of Christophe, that was when the country reached the height of its power and prosperity. During that time, you had the Citadel, the largest military fortification in this side of the world. You had the palace, you had schools and universities, military academies, art academies, hospitals, medical schools. You had a robust agriculture sector that was enough to feed the entire population as well as sell on the international markets. You had a massive standing army and a navy going around attacking European slave ships. During that time, Christophe was easily the most powerful black man on the planet. And Vastey was his right hand. He was part of his inner circle, and he was putting out books, literature, pamphlets, in response, debunking the European colonists. And we're going to read one of those works here today, right? So today we're going to be reading, like I said, the book is entitled Political Remarks on Some French Works and French Newspapers Concerning Haiti. So the ancestor Vastey, he's going to be doing what I do every single day on YouTube. He's going to be debunking the adversary, right? So not wasting no time. Let's jump straight into the book, man. Now, before I get started, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the ancestor, in the mind of the ancestor in the year 1817 when his book came out, right? So he's about 36 years old, right? So he is a high-ranking government official in the Haitian revolutionary government during the reign of Christophe in the north, right? So obviously he's definitely a man of wealth and power and privilege and prestige. He was born in 1781 on a plantation in one of the most brutal colonies in the world, right? He has seen all types of horrors and crimes against humanity take place most likely throughout his life. He has survived the Haitian Revolution, right? He has gone through all the storms and the ups and downs of the Haitian Revolution, and he has made it out on the other side alive with the functionality of his limbs and his mind. So that in itself is an accomplishment, because many ancestors did not survive that. They died, and died brutally, and died terrible deaths. He's been on the field of battle against all the major colonial powers, from the French, the British, the Spanish, you name it. And now currently in the year 1817, he is a man of great privilege and status and rank. His close friend Christophe is the king of the nation. And now in the year 1817, he is now sitting writing this book about to debunk the French newspapers and debunk the French journalists and debunk the French colonists, right? And debunk the French government. So let's get into it, not wasting no time. Let's get straight into the book. Take a look up on the screen. The ancestor said this: the principal view of the French writers is to draw the attention of Europe upon America, and particularly on Haiti, the eternal source of their regret, and betray its people into false and dangerous measures which would plunge them into the deepest calamity. Our object is to enlighten Europe in regard to the moral and political situation of Haiti, to prove the justice of our accusations against the French, to show the excellence and righteousness of the cause and the just ground of our pretensions to liberty and independence, to unmask the perfidious policy of France and render it ineffectual, and disappoint her criminal hopes forever. Now, time out. Like I said, reading this book is right on time due to the recent events we see taking place, especially in Mali, with the French government sending spies and secret agents to undermine and overthrow the government, as well as the fact that I've been going around debunking, all these con artists and grifters. So now we're going to see the ancestor himself debunking the French government. Now let's get into it. Let's continue. They have neglected nothing that could contribute to undermine our strength at home. They have studied our manners, our habits, and our inclinations. They have made inquiries into the state of our rural and political economy, our government, our strength, and our resources. In fine, they have endeavored in every place to ascertain the strong and weak points of our position in order to consolidate the system of perfidy which they intend to employ against us. Now listen, my brothers in the AES, this book is right on time for y'all. This book is right on time. The ancestor himself, he's giving us the game. Now let's continue. We cannot certainly be accused of aggression by any state. The French had a right, if they please, to write and publish some thousands of volumes, and their newspapers to circulate 1,000 falsehoods. We also have a right to compose some pages in defense of our privileges, nor can it give umbrage to any. Our adversaries have dragged us very reluctantly to the arena. We did not provoke them to battle. We never were the aggressors. We have been compelled to oppose to them the very arguments and depend on the authority of the very same examples which they have brought forward to invade our rights. If they should be vanquished by force of argument, as they have been by the force of our arms, to them alone the fault must be imputed. Oh my God, the ancestor just cooked the French government. Time out. Now listen, the ancestor said, our adversaries have dragged us very reluctantly to the arena. We did not provoke them to battle, right? He said, listen, I didn't want to do it to you. So listen, the ancestor basically said, in this book, I'm about to cook you, right? I didn't want to do it to you. You dragged us to the arena of battle. Listen, I didn't want to do it to you, but now I got to do it to you. That's what he said right there. And you notice in that last part, he sent like an indirect shot to the French government. He said, listen, if they should be vanquished by the force of our arguments, as they have been by the force of our arms, to them alone the fault must be imputed. Listen, he said, listen, we already destroyed you on the field of battle, gun to gun, barrel to barrel. Now you want to go toe to toe in the arena of ideas and debate? Let's get it. Let's get to it, right? Let's get to it. The same way I'll be cooking these grifters, the ancestor about to cook the French government. Let's continue. Happy and content to live in the bosom of our island and reconciled to the destiny imposed upon us by the master of the universe, we ask nothing that belongs to other nations. All of our endeavors are directed merely to secure our safety and the amelioration of our social condition. We offer up prayers only for the happiness of mankind without distinction of color, country, or nation, and feel satisfied with enjoying at home the peace and felicity which we desire to be universally granted to the world. But when we are attacked in our dearest affections and most rooted interests, when our enemies study by every artifice to distort the facts and to propagate calumnies, lies, that's what that means. When he says propagate calumnies, telling lies, right? As per usual, the French government telling lies. To give birth to objections, the most puerile, even such as the prejudice of color, the doctrine of legitimacy, in order to impugn the justice of our cause and dispute our title to liberty and independence. When they call in aid the vengeance of a European confederacy, are we, like indifferent spectators, to be allowed to take no interest in the discussion? Can we act in such a manner? Shall we abandon to our enemies in undisputed field, permit them to indulge fights of fancy, and dispose in imagination of our persons and rights, natural, civil, and political? Shall we go as lambs to the slaughter without even opening our mouths? Shall we suffer them to appeal to justice, morals, and the laws of nations, while we can invoke them in truth and righteousness against our oppressors? Shall we permit the opinion of those well-disposed and benevolent persons who do not comprehend the nature of the events which have taken place in Haiti to be deceived and led astray? How can they be competent to judge of our differences if they only hear the clamor and declarations of one party without the reply and the complaints of the other? Would they not eventually withdraw and pass over to the enemy? Ought we to neglect the means of informing them in regard to the state of things and the facts? Should not then calumny, that dreadful weapon, when handled by wicked, artful, and insidious men, prevail at length on righteousness and the justice of all causes? Who will defend our rights if we do not defend them ourselves? Shall we commit our greatest and best interests to strangers? Could the person willing to incur the responsibility of so equitable a charge be equal to the execution of the office, if it were destitute of the necessary materials and local information to assist and direct him? If, on the other hand, we were to acquiesce in silence, our friends who knew the justice of our claims would attribute it to the want of ability and real knowledge, while the enemy would interpret it in his favor and give weight to unjust pretensions and calumny. How powerful and numerous, then, are the motives to enlighten public opinion? Every man who encourages a sense of honor and reputation is anxious to deserve the suffrage of public opinion. Sovereigns and nations are subject to its power. They who provoke and insult it are madmen and resemble in their conduct women of loose character, who have thrown away the mask and never blush. It is impossible, therefore, to commence an attack with more determined violence than by an attempt to lower us in the public opinion and stain what men hold so dear, their reputation and their glory. Now, time out. You see, back during those times, right, the European journalists, the European newspapers, it was kind of like the grifters of today, right? They didn't believe that they would get a response. They thought it would be a one-way conversation. I'm going to dominate the narrative and nobody's going to respond. So the ancestor, he came back and said, nah, brother, I got a response for you. We're going to shoot back. We're sending the missiles right back. And let's continue. What people on earth is more in need of the general suffrage and esteem than the people of Haiti, a nation of whom so many injustices and prejudice are still weighing, a nation whose political and moral existence is yet a phenomenon in the eyes of thousands who are blinded by passion? Black as we are and yellow in complexion, bowed as we have been for centuries under the yoke of slavery and ignorance, assimilated to the condition of the brute, how resolutely are we to exert ourselves? How much of perseverance, wisdom, and virtue is necessary for reanimating our race to this moment in chain and in darkness? Where shall we turn our eyes? After having established our rights by the sword, we acquire a new lust in the eyes of the world when we defend them by the pen. Our reputation becomes greater and more glorious, and we include ourselves in reality in the number of civilized states. Our enemies, vanquished in the field, do not refuse us the credit of possessing physical strength. We have given proof of strength, intrepidity, and courage, but they believe notwithstanding that our capacities are too narrow to admit of the exertion of the energy and intellectual skill capable of directing us in our political careers. We shall endeavor to establish the contrary by a description of the different advances we have made in the scale of social order. For our guide in the statement of facts, we take impartiality and the truth. In the revolution of our country, as in all of those which have violently shaken other countries, there has been much good, counterbalanced by much evil. No people has been exempted from errors. Infallibility is the province not of man, but of God alone. White men have shed our blood in torrents, and we have not been less prodigal of theirs. And in our civil wars, we have shed our own in abundance. A minute detail of the facts, events, and the causes which produced them belongs naturally to our history. In the course of this work, we have felt a regret that we were not able to expatiate without exceeding the limits of simple reflections, which in order to their being well timed, required to be hastily written. It was impossible, however, to avoid making occasionally digressions such as we considered indispensable. The reader should recollect that we write for foreigners as well as natives, and that with regard to any peculiarity of expression, every nation has a language adapted to its climate, manners, and institutions. Always in haste about that in which we are engaged, we know that traces will be visible in our compositions of the precipitation with which they have been written. This will continue to be so until the nation stands upon a firmer basis. The history of so interesting a people as that of Haiti, of their protracted sufferings and the extraordinary events that have rescued them from slavery, a history, the plan of which should embrace, in addition to the narrative, a portrait of our manners and customs and gradual improvement in civilization, arts, and the sciences. From 1790 to the present period, Such an historical record would be unique in its kind in the annals of the world and would require time, profound study and reflection, minute research, extensive learning, experience, and a degree of talent infinitely greater than we possess. A history of this description would be a splendid trophy to him who should attempt it, a triumphant answer, and the most complete vindication with which the people of Haiti could present to our friends and our enemies. Now, I guess that was the introduction. Now let's get into the main event, right? As you can see, the political remarks of particular French works and newspapers. Let's get into it. Take a look up on the screen. If there ever were a righteous cause worthy of exciting the attention of men, it is that of the people of Haiti. And as much as it is connected with the interests of all mankind, and if there ever were unjust, chimerical, and revolting pretensions, they are those which are unceasingly advanced by the French in respect of a brave and generous people. Passions and resentment alone, they say, have occasioned the loss of the colony of Saint-Domingue to reestablish former ties of interest and affection between France and that rich colony. All the prudence of a regular and legitimate government will be indispensably requisite. We shall further develop the system of prudence which we expect from the French. But first we ask, who kindled the passions which lost the colony of Saint-Domingue? Who inflamed them? Who called them forth? Who proclaimed the freedom of the Negroes in the Leeward Islands? Who would have forcibly deprived them of the noble boon 10 years after it was granted? Who murdered men and put them to the torture merely because they resolved to be free? Could it be expected of free men that they would again resume their chains at the caprice of tyrants? What could justify the introduction of war, devastation, pillage, fire, plague, and death amongst an inoffensive people before warmly attached to them? What could authorize the attempt of that expedition and commission of so many acts of perfidy, injustice, and barbarity? Where was the authority to oblige Toussaint and an immense number of innocent victims to perish by the most horrible torments? Terrible but salutary tidings which will ever preserve us from the yoke of those cannibals. We reposed such confidence in France at that time that General Toussaint sent his children there. Some other generals and persons of distinction followed his example and gave the same proof of attachment to the metropolis in sending their children also with money to defray the expenses of education. At the time of General Leclerc's expedition, the French endeavored to employ Toussaint's children as instruments to detach the father from his brethren's cause. Now, time out. Yes, that is true. When Napoleon sent that expedition, he used the fact that Toussaint Louverture had his children being educated in France. So they used that as leverage to get him to betray the cause. So that is true, right? I repeat. At the time of Leclerc's expedition, the French endeavored to employ Toussaint's children as instruments to detach the father from his brother's cause. They then sent back two of them with Mr. Quanon, their preceptor. In the conference which took place at Henry between the general, his children, and the preceptor, the love of his country had to struggle with paternal affection. The unfortunate father was driven by the barbarous French to the cruel alternative of sacrificing either the safety of his brothers and his country or the life of his own children. God damn. Let's continue. After a severe struggle and much irresolution, the wretched parent nobly accomplished the sacrifice of his children for his country's good. He sent them back with the preceptor to the French general, who, deceived in his hopes by the magnanimity of the action, returned them to him again. It was only after the violation of the treaty by the French general that he was arrested, loaded with chains, and his children, family, officers transported to Europe, where that great man breathed his last in the dungeon of the castle of Dejoux. His deplorable death, the great character and firmness of soul he displayed in his long and dreadful confinement, rendered him worthy of a place amongst the heroes of ancient times. As nothing more was to be apprehended from General Toussaint, his children became useless instruments and were permitted by the French government to live. Not so to the children of existing chiefs. That perfidious, cruel, and barbarous government avenged on those innocent victims the resistance which their fathers had opposed. They were immolated to the manes of the murderers who fell under the arms of their brave progenitors. Bereft of every support, abandoned to the orphans' hospital in Paris, separated forever from their unhappy families, they were doomed to perish with hunger, cold, misery, and to poisons. Now, time out. Now, in that part of the book, Vastey makes references to the children of the generals that were captured and held hostage and used as leverage by the French government. Now, in the first instance, he talked about how the French government tried to leverage the children of Toussaint Louverture against him, right? But then he said that there were also children of other generals that, like he said, fell under the mains of the murderers, that were immolated, that fell to hunger and poison, things like that. For example, one of Christophe's children, his eldest son, his firstborn son, take a look up on the screen, Francois Ferdinand Henri Christophe, born in 1794, and he died in 1805. So as you can see, died around 10, 11 years old, was the eldest son and the first child of Field General Christophe, the future king of Haiti, and his wife, Marie-Louise Quadavid. So as you can see, sacrificed by the French government. Now let's continue. 3 months after the arrival of the French, peace was concluded between General Toussaint and General Leclerc on the strength of the flattering promises of the latter, who affirmed upon an oath that the first consul, his brother-in-law Bonaparte, had sent him to maintain liberty and equality. Now, time out. Now, when the French invaded in 1802, they came obviously to restore slavery. But as you can see, they said that we have come to maintain liberty and equality, right? It kind of sounds like in the modern day when they talk about we are here to protect and uphold democracy. Now, let's continue. The king, our august sovereign, he talking about Christophe, who was then a brigadier general, entrusted to the care and friendship of General Boudet, who was setting out for France, his eldest son, Francis Ferdinand, who was 9 years of age, with money for his education, in the hope of seeing him at some future period, instructed in the politeness, learning, and manners of Europe. Delusive hope, fate, and French perfidy were to dispose of him otherwise. That unhappy child, when he quit his native land, was destined never more to enjoy the tender looks and embraces of his parents and of an unfortunate family. Mr. Le Bon de Boin affects to be unacquainted with these circumstances and has the confidence to say that the king had 2 sons at the Quanon school, and he affirms they were sent back with the rest when the expedition took place, while no one has been suffered to return, but all have perished in a manner that renders infamous the government of France. Though we had witnessed many of their crimes, we could scarcely believe that the government of a civilized country would consent to pollute itself by a deed so atrocious as the murder of children by the instrumentality of distress and poisons. Now, time out. Now, in that part of the book, the ancestor, I guess, was debunking a journalist or a Frenchman by the name of Monsieur de Bon de Boin or whatever, and who was basically telling lies. He said, we sent all the children back of the Haitian generals. We sent them all back to the island, when in reality, you killed them. You killed them. That's what you did. You killed them by means of torture, starvation, and poisons. And Vastey says, we can't even believe that the government of a civilized country would torture and poison children to death for no reason. Now let's continue. Nothing, unhappily, is more notorious than that of those unhappy creatures. Not one has made his appearance in this country a second time, and we have the depositions of some eyewitnesses who prove that His Royal Highness, the much to be lamented Prince Ferdinand, died in Paris at the Orphans' Hospital on the 7th of October, 1805. Such was the melancholy death of a child of our king. O cruel French, O death, O calamity ever to be regretted. Such is the reward of the confidence a father reposed in you. Thus you gratify a thirst of revenge and punish an innocent child because you cannot make his father your victim. O Henry, my king, afflicted parent, be comforted. It is better for your beloved son to be no more than to continue still in the power of monsters who would have treated you as they did General Toussaint, have inflicted the same agonizing torture, and have put in the scales his life on the one hand with the safety of your country on the other hand. We know the magnanimity of your soul. There would have been no hesitation on your part for an instant to make that painful and noble sacrifice for your country. Now, time out. In that part of the book, Vastey is basically, telling Christophe, listen, bro, I know it hurts, but I know 10 times out of 10, you would have made the sacrifice for the country. That's the sacrifice of a leader, right? It's better to have lost your son than to be under the yoke of the Frenchman. It is better to let your son go than to bow your head in the face of the adversary. Now let's continue. The ancestor debunking the French government. Mr. de Boin pretends to know nothing of that crime because he affects or is unprincipled enough to affect doubts on the numberless enormities of which his countrymen have been guilty. We ought, he says, to reject everything that appears to be evidently exaggerated and inconsistent with the dignity of men. The calamities were in themselves so severe as readily to admit of amplification. So then, according to Mr. de Boin, it is in imagination only that we saw thousands of the bodies of our countrymen floating on the shores and drowned in the boats. It was in imagination only that we were chased, persecuted, and hunted by bloodhounds as wild beasts. We were dreaming when we were hung, burnt, and slaughtered by grape shot, when on the faith of treaties we had laid down our arms. It was in imagination only that we were transported to Europe to constitute the forlorn hope of the armies, to be cast into dungeons, condemned to die of hunger, poison, and excruciating torture, and compelled as galley slaves to dig the wells of Corsica and fill up the marshes of Mantua. We imagine only that the French behaved with consummate dissimulation and treachery. After that, after having followed them with negligent confidence on board their ships, accompanied by our wives and children and effects, we were stripped, loaded with irons, men, women, and children, stabbed and thrown into the depths of the ocean, or transported to the colonies of terra firma to be sold as slaves. Shades of my unfortunate countrymen, Toussaint Louverture, Maurepas, Charles Belair, Tomani, Dommage, La Martiniere, and you, Ferdinand, unhappy prince, ye victims, basely murdered, and it is an illusion of fancy. Were you not their victims, Frenchmen? When then is the nature of your disposition, and what are the arguments you employ? What else had we to endure for having a right to repel your ignominious yoke? Were we to suffer ourselves to be utterly exterminated? What is wanted to establish the rights of a nation, become in fact independent by the strength of her arms, and in principle by the equity of her cause? Impressed with the conviction of the powerful reasons which forced us to separate from France, our enemies acknowledged that the expedition directed against us was unjust, and that we were under the necessity of proclaiming our independence to avoid utter ruin. Having, as they themselves admit, lost the ancient rights they had upon this country by unjust aggression and innumerable crimes, they would create new privileges which they endeavor to maintain by various pretensions and idle sophistry. Now, time out. Now, in that last sentence, in that last phrase, Vastey basically says that France, even they'll admit that they lost the colony, right, due to their own crimes and barbaric behavior. But instead of simply, going about their business, they're trying to make up all these, bogus arguments, slander us in the media and the newspapers to justify continuing, to bother us and, not leave us alone. That's basically what he's saying. Now, anyway, we could leave part one right there. We could stop part one right there. We'll come back with part two. We're going to read the ancestor debunking the adversary, the French government. I think it's right on time, like I said, due to the current events. So, anyways, it's your boy Nevercard, that's Celine, back in the Billy, yes indeed. 21 Cannons, first single off the new project. Pin comment at the top, subscribe to the Patreon, NCD 1814, and I'm gone. Peace. King of the North, and I feel like Moise. Took a few losses, I'm back on my feet. Selling they soul for trinkets and cash. Right on the front like the leader from Chad. Feel like a see me, I feel like I'm Idris. Walking on gold, I handle my business. Honor, integrity, money, and power. Told me she love me, she want me in power. Told her I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Told her come over, come see me in person. Told her come over, I'm sick of the talking. Don't got no time, cause that money be calling. Working all night and I'm up in the morning. Love when I call her, she love my attention. Body and soul, I'm truly protected. Back on that road and big body business. Told her I love her, I told her she mine. Get in that passenger seat, we gon' ride. Back on my mission, that money been stacking. Came from the bottom, I'm steady expanding. Run to the check and I pull up and vanish. Grabbing the neck from the back when I smash. Don't need no question, they know it's official. Cut from the cloth and my life ain't no fiction. Ride for the scene like I'm army enlist. Gotta stay focused, I'm moving deliberate. Heart of a king and my heart full of pain. Look at my neck and it's flooded with chains. And I got Desaline blood in my veins. Enemy watching, I stay with a flame. Keep it 100, they know how we move. Black on black beam, interior blue. How you gon' leave me? I told you I love you. Pain in my heart, you knew I was trouble. Enemy watching, they wanna invade it. Hoping my brothers don't never betray us. Been on my mind and I hope I can save us. Look at my flaws, I don't see perfection. But I'm authentic, I'm whipping the 7. Like it's a phantom, I'm still manifesting. Gotta get money, I gotta get paid. Stay on my toes when I'm ducking these snakes. Go to my wrist and the queen on my arm. Feeling my energy, loving my charm. Might go put Desaline face on a piece. Ready for war, that's how you get peace. Know I'm protected, I'm ready for action. When I walk in, I need 21 cannons. Secret location, I'm up in the palace. One of a kind and she loving my manners. One of a kind and I'm telling the truth. His and her Bentleys, I gotta get to. Feeling like future, we never gon' lose. Feeling like Garvey, I'm running the block. Entering off firm and I'm letting off shots. King of the North and I'm up at the top. How you gon' leave me? I told you I love you. Pain in my heart and you knew I was trouble. Enemy watching, they wanna invade it. Hoping my brothers don't never betray us. Been on my mind and I hope I can save us. Look at my flaws, I don't